Hey. So I tried yesterday to upload a video about my DNA story, and apparently 22 minutes is way too long for YouTube, which I don't understand, and I don't know how to trim because I'm just not technically advanced enough, I guess. Anyway, so I'm going to try to make it a little bit shorter. It is a big story, so I don't know why 22 minutes is too big, but maybe it's the file I'm using. Like I said, suggestions for me and how to do it like for free and something maybe that I can do that's easy for me. So, anyway, here's my story. So, 2 years ago, I was on Ancestry and I got a message from another genealogist, and she asked me if my mother was so and so. And I got back to her and said, yes, she is. And she's like, okay, well, was she born in 1940? And I was like, she was not. And so she said that she had a client who claimed that this person was her mother. So I wrote back and I said, well, I don't think that's true because I was the only child that my mother ever had that I knew of. And so I asked her to send me some documentation to see if I can verify it. So I think that was like in April or May of 2020, I think. And so she sent me a marriage certificate that had a man's name, my mother's name, her birth date, but 1940, her birth state, her parents' names, which were the exact same. So it piqued my curiosity, and I was like, this is strange. So then I was like, well, do you have pictures of this woman at all by chance? And so she said, let me ask my client. So she asked her client, and her client was like, yes, I do. And so she sent me two pictures. Now, these two pictures showed one was two women in the picture, and I think they were both pregnant, if I remember correctly. And then the other one was of a woman who was pregnant, a man holding a child. And so I looked, and the one with the man, I was like, that doesn't, I don't think that looks like my mom. I don't think. But the one that had the two women in it, I was like, oh my gosh, that kind of looks like my mom. So then I decided that I would forward the pictures to my daughters and ask them if they thought that that looked like their grandma. My one daughter was like, Mom, I'm not good with face recognition, so I doubt that I would be able to answer you. And then the other daughter, she goes, yes, I do believe that one of them looks like grandma. So I said, well, which one do you think it is? And she said, the one on the left. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the one I think looks like my mom. So then I texted or messaged the genealogist back, and I said, can you tell me which woman does this your client think is her mom? And I didn't tell the genealogist which one I thought. I just wanted to see what she would come back with. And the genealogist came back and said, my client says it's the lady on the left. I was like, holy crud. So now, mind you, I was on the phone with my friend who is a pro genealogist, and I was telling her all this, and I sent her the pictures, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. This is crazy. Do you really think it's my mom? And so then she started helping me look for marriage certificates and things like that. I believe, well, we had the marriage certificate because this lady's client had sent it to me. So then I was like, well, this is just weird, you know? And it was told to me that the client of this person was a female and that she had two brothers. and they were given up in New York between, I believe it was like 1964 and 1967, something like that. And I was like, well, that's weird because my mom had relatives in New York, and there are still relatives in New York. And I was like, well, that's just weird. And so, anyway, I was like, okay, maybe. So, the pro genealogist, like I said, who is my friend, she's like, you really need to go talk to your dad. And I'm just like, I don't want to go talk to my dad. I want to figure this out on my own. So then that day, that was June 23rd of 2020. That day I spent 8 hours on the phone with my pro genealogist. Not all at the same time, but it was off and on all day. But it totaled up to 8 hours. And so I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to see if mom was ever married to somebody else. And no, I scratched that. I was like, I'm going to find myself in Ancestry. Well, a year before that, it was a year before that, I had done DNA. So my husband passed away in March of 2019, and then I don't remember when I did my DNA, but it was in 2019. I got it back, and the only reason why I did my DNA was because my dad never knew who his birth father was. And I was like, well, I'll do mine so then I can find out who his birth father was. Now, in 2019, my friend and progenealogist, she did help me find who my dad's biological parent was in back in 2019. So then I had went to lunch with my dad, and I was telling him that I had done my DNA and that I found out who and the reason why I did it, and that I had found his biological father, and if he ever wanted to know, then I could tell him. And I told him, and Dad, it's crazy. They live like an hour away. And he looked at me and he got really upset, and he goes, I implore you to stop what you're doing because you don't know what you're going to find. He's like, I know who my father is. And I was like, whoa, okay. So so that was the end of that. So now back to June 23rd, 2020. I was born in California, and in Ancestry, in California Birth Index, there is a way that you can search for yourself. Well, so I put my full maiden name in there, my birth date, and where I was born in California. Nobody showed up. I was like, well, that's weird because I was born, in California. I have my birth certificate. I know this. So then I was like, So there are, I think, 5 different states that you can put the actual birth date, the month, the day, and the year, and the city, and you can put the gender. You don't have to put a name at all, and it will list all of those children that were born on that day in that county, city, state. But I think Minnesota does it, California does it. I can't remember all. Oh, Texas does it. I can't remember all the different states, but I think there's 5 of them. But anyway, so I was like, okay. So I put my month, my day, my year, the county that I was born in California, and I put that I was a female. And it came back with there was one person, and it had my name, and my name is spelled differently. That's why I go by T, because nobody can get my name right when they're spelling it. So I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh. I threw my computer down and I immediately started crying. Now, I was on the phone with my pro genealogist. She's like, are you okay? Are you all right? And I was like, my whole life has been a lie. I cannot believe this. Apparently, this client was right. I do have siblings. Well, come to find out, the people who I believed were my father's biological parents were actually my biological grandparents. And my mother actually had been married to my biological father, and she had been married to this other person. So my dad, who raised me, was her third husband. And so I flipped. I flipped out. It took me a few hours, and then that night I was on Facebook and I was trying to find my relatives. So I have lived in Minnesota now. Come September 1st, I will have been here 30 years. My biological people have lived 45 minutes away from me. Pretty much this whole time. Well, actually, this whole time. They have lived 45 minutes away from me. Yeah, crazy, right? The other thing is that I found out that my biological father had a son, and he has the exact same birthday to the year. And I was like, oh my gosh, did my mom have twins? And were we separated? I mean, I don't get this. So I messaged him. And so come to find out, what happened was my mom and my biological father were living in California. She sent him a Dear John letter when he was over in Vietnam. And my mom and dad met, and they moved, and my dad, who raised me, adopted me. And my biological father, he remarried to a woman who had 2 children, and so he adopted them, and then they had 2 more children. So I have 2 stepbrothers and 2 half-brothers on my biological side, and on my mother's side, I have 2 brothers and a sister. And so I went from an only child to one of 8 children. The twin is actually my stepbrother. He did do DNA, and he found out that he is not related at all. And we found out that yes, my biological father had adopted the 2 children. The other kind of odd thing was my younger half brother is his name, his first and middle name is the exact same as my husband's. Crazy. It was crazy. So anyway, so I've met my stepbrother, who has my same exact birthday, and we actually call each other twins because we are, in a way. He was born an hour and a half earlier than me. And then I've met my one half brother. I haven't met my other step brother, or my other half brother on my biological father's side. And then on my mother, the oldest son has died, and then I met my sister, and I've talked to my brother. So it's crazy, just absolutely crazy. So then I found out that my progenealogist actually knew about this secret, but she was sworn to secrecy by my mother many, 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 many years ago. And so I wasn't really mad at her for keeping the secret because she was sworn to secrecy. So, I mean, she can keep secret, obviously. So anyway, so that's my DNA story. So I guess what I would say is, if you don't want to know secrets, don't do your DNA. Because I thought I knew my whole family, and boy, was I wrong. So now it's been 14 minutes, almost 15. So hopefully I can upload this to YouTube and you guys can listen to my DNA story. Thanks for listening.